Has anything happened while we've been gone? Well, we're going to talk about that more on today's episode of the Geek Watch podcast.
This is the Geek Watch podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 199 of the Geek Watch podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hello, Brian.
So, welcome back.
Welcome back.
We've been gone for a little while.
Yes.
We've had a little bit of Shakespeare.
Shakespeare, COVID.
Oh, yes.
A couple of things have happened.
Oh, yes. So, we have been gone for a few weeks because you were directing and I was in Midsummer Night's Dream. And we probably would have been back last week, but we did get delayed because this was a very retro show. And in the spirit of being retro, we decided to go all the way back to 2000, and half the cast wound up with COVID. So we had to delay for about a week and wait for that to blow over. Yesterday, I got my COVID vaccine.
Yay.
Again.
Yeah, boosters. Mm-hmm.
But we did get our 2 weekends in. And how do you feel now that it's over?
There's that relief that it being over, but also that tremendous sorrow
Yeah.
that I'm not going to work with this exact same cast ever again. And it was just the most beautiful, magical show that it was the best thing I could have ever wished for. And you and the cast were just so, there aren't words for how wonderful this show was and how immensely proud and huge my ego is after this wonderful show.
Well, deservedly so that you have a big ego, because the show went off with everything that we had to deal with, obviously. Right. Lots of challenges we dealt with, but we were able to come together as a cast, and we had 2 really good weekends. They were very well attended.
Mm-hmm. Very well.
So you couldn't ask for more than that. And I do know what you mean about that melancholy that hits after you've done a show. You're so tired. You're like, oh, thank goodness we don't have to do this again.
Yes, now I get to sleep.
But there's always that, and it's like you say, it's that you may act with some of these people again, but that family is done.
Right.
And of course, you start to get to my age and you realize your last time on stage could be your last time on stage.
Oh, yes.
And I hadn't really thought about going back up on stage. I had done Carmilla a few years ago, but I hadn't really thought about getting back on stage again for a while.
Besides, like, magician, you did have done a few magicians since then, right?
No, not really.
Really?
Because, of course, COVID hit, and so a lot of the performing just went out the door, and so I am planning on trying to do some stuff on stage again. It had been a while. It had been a while, and again, that thought of one day you're going to walk on stage for the last time, and you don't know when that necessarily is going to be, obviously. Not necessarily a matter of you could die tomorrow, but it's just normally, especially when it comes to theater, you never know when the next show is going to be that you're going to be interested in, can get cast in.
Right, yes.
And so this idea of, again, just thinking about how much time has passed between when I was doing Carmilla to when we were doing this show, it was like 6 years. And so you never know. And so it's always...
And if I'm not wrong, is that theater company that you did that with is no longer around, correct?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I have been doing theater for about, at this point, over 30 years. We've been doing theater together. And I have my book of memories, and I still have the news article about Harvey, which was the first show that we did together many, many years ago. But not counting the theater company, of course, that we did Midsummer Night's Dream, there were 6 theater companies I've performed with.
Right.
They're all gone. Every single one of them.
Yeah.
And so those families that you form in the 2-3 months that you're rehearsing and practicing and getting chemistry with each other, and then of course you get to put the show on, and that's always the best part of it, even though by the time the show itself rolls around, you've been doing this for so long, you're starting to get a little tired.
Yeah, then you have to see it through the audience, and you hear that feedback, that laughter, that
Right.
those sighs, those claps, those applause. Then you realize it's all worth it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Now, have you directed before?
One time before, many years ago, for Canal Players, and that was A Miracle on 34th Street.
Okay.
Yeah, this was my second time directing.
Yeah, and Miracle on 34th, that was, how long ago was that?
Oh my goodness, I'm not even sure. It was so long ago. It may have only been like 2 years after we did Harvey.
Wow, that would have been a long time
Maybe
ago.
2009, 2010-ish.
Yeah.
Around there, probably.
Why do you think it took you so long to direct another show, do you think?
I don't know. I guess it hadn't really occurred to me until we were discussing at Mountain Roots, where we were doing Midsummer. We were discussing this year's season, and we were discussing, someone said that they wanted to do something that was in a speakeasy, and I thought, well, Midsummer would work in a speakeasy in the 1920s, and the more we discussed it, the more we workshopped it, and realizing how well it fit, that instead of magical potions, well, it's opium and absinthe. And instead of King of the Fairies and Duke of Athens, we have these two rival kingpins who are running these moonshine dens and opium dens and speakeasies, and how well it worked. So the more we start discussing it, and then the president of the company said, do you want to direct that? And that was the first time I'd really thought about directing. And then it came down to it, and I said that I would, and that's about the size of it. That's the story. Then I call up all my friends and tell them that I want them to be in my show, and you guys show up for me. So
yeah. Well, it was a very unique take on that play, and a lot of people who came, they really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. It was great. And for me, I'd have to say what I personally enjoyed about doing the play was Shakespeare is known for these long monologues, these very dramatic monologues, and in this play, there's one big, long monologue, and it's my character, Peter Quince, that delivers it, and it's tedious and horrible. And what was funny is because, of course, friend of the show and also our Oberon, Kevin Pauly, I remember when we were doing rehearsals for that scene where I'm doing the prologue, and if we offend, it is with our goodwill that you should think we come not to offend. And I would look out in the audience, and we would see Kevin as Oberon sitting out there, and he's just looking at me, and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? He looks really, oh, wait a minute, he's supposed to look
he's
like
in character.
He's in character. I thought, what am I doing wrong? It's like, no, you're doing it right, because you're terrible.
And I fully expected that to be written on a scroll, that you would be reading it out the entire time, and you blew me away. You memorized both those long, tedious but brief, both tedious and brief, tragic and mirth, and you memorized it all. I just cannot believe it. And,
well, for me, to be honest, I felt like if I were to read it off the scroll, which, I mean, technically you should, that's what the character was doing or should have been doing. But I felt like I would have been anchored. Mm-hmm. I'd have been stuck there. And if I'm sitting there reading, I can't really express out to the audience. And so I just felt like I had to put the work in to do that. And I felt that because I did, that gave me a lot more movement on stage. It gave us a chance to.
It looked fantastic. It sounded great. It just blew me away.
Well, thank you. But yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun to do. It was great to be on stage again, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do that soon. And I have to admit, if I were to get the chance to direct, I would love to direct The Deadly Game.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe someday I'll get a chance to do that. But that show was one of my introductions to theater through HBO.
Yeah.
If you remember a long time ago when HBO was first starting out, they did a lot of stage plays and filmed them. There were certain television style edits that they used. It wasn't exactly like you were filming a stage play. There were certain tropes of filming in a studio that they used, but that's where I learned about Wait Until Dark, Stacy Keach. There was Sherlock Holmes with Frank Langella,
Oh, wow.
which was amazing.
It sounds amazing.
And Barefoot in the Park.
Oh, I love Barefoot in the Park.
Yeah, Bess Armstrong and Richard Thomas. And then, of course, this wonderful play, it's called The Deadly Game, about a traveling salesman who gets caught in the snow and finds this Swiss chalet with these older gentlemen, these retired gentlemen. And they are a judge and a prosecuting attorney and a defense attorney. And they have this little game that they play to entertain themselves. And so they invite him to play with them, and it's basically they do a mock trial. And they try to find a crime that they can charge him with, and that crime turns out to be murder. Mm-hmm. And as the play goes on, it's like, how real is this actually? And there's that question. And then you start to wonder, well, did he maybe murder someone for real?
Uh-huh.
And so like I said, it's like a one room. It all takes place, obviously, in this house, in this living room. And so it's like a one set play.
Yeah.
But I just love that kind of drama and that question of what's really going on here.
Did he die and now is he on trial for his sins? Yeah, that sounds really interesting, Brian.
It's a fun little show, but it's got that kind of that spooky aspect to it.
Yeah.
And maybe someday we will definitely see about that. But yeah, it's been a fun few weeks. But we are back now.
We're back behind the mic.
We are back behind the mic. Not that we can talk about a whole lot. Still. Still. Because this is a very weird situation right now, because all things being equal, if everything was back to normal, as we would say, you and I would be excitedly talking about a show that's premiering tonight. And see, you're looking.
Yeah, I'm looking confused. What premieres tonight?
See, because you've been so busy in play that, you, of course, getting back out into the world. But, yeah, again, can't really talk about it too much because, again, the SAG-AFTRA strike. But tonight there's a beginning of a certain show involving a certain Norse god of mischief.
Is that tonight? Oh, my gosh. I don't know. I had no idea.
Yes, it starts tonight. Yes, It does. And we can't really talk about it right now yet. But we are partially to a place where we can start talking about things again because the WGA, the Writers Guild, they have their tentative agreement.
Yes.
That's a plus. Mm-hmm. So it's not everything we need yet to get the machinery going again, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. And I don't want to say shocked because I knew that there was going to be no possibility of an agreement without these items. But I thought this was going to take longer because of the nature of the demands that the WGA had that producers did not want to capitulate on, and they wound up having to. The main things, of course, are the writers' rooms are back, and there are minimums for writers' rooms now.
Nice.
So if you have a show of a certain number of episodes in a season, there's a certain number of writers you have to have in the writer's room. And it has to be a writer's room. None of this day play. We'll bring a writer in for a day, pay him a day rate, and then,
kick him to the curb.
Right.
Nice.
So that...
No more Zordon writers.
Exactly. And they've also, with the AI, it's in the agreement now that you cannot use AI to write scripts completely. Writers can use it as a tool, but it depends on a limited basis. And of course, writers have to say, this is
partially.
Yeah, and exactly what they're going to use
with
it for.
artificial and natural flavors.
There you go. But also on the AI front, they have said that no WGA work, no writer who's in the WGA, their work cannot be used to train an AI. Mm-hmm. And that's a big deal.
Yeah.
A lot of my novelist writer friends and short story writer friends have been going online. There's a website that you can look up your name to see if your work has been used to train an AI. And a lot of people have been shocked to find out, wow. Yeah. Huh. So, yeah, it happens a lot. Mm-hmm. So the AI thing was huge. The writers' rooms were huge for sure. Here's the one thing that shocked the heck out of me, though. And I will say that this shocked me because For the streaming companies to agree to this I thought this was going to be a non-starter. And this is why I thought we had a long time to go yet before this strike was going to be settled. And that is the amount of money that you get paid in streaming if the show does well. Because, of course, there's been all these articles and people coming online saying, hey, this show did really well and I'm getting fractions of a penny.
Right, yeah.
And so now if a show does better, that means the writers can get royalties off of it.
Excellent, good.
Now, what made that to me a non-starter wasn't just the matter of paying them more money, because what this meant was you would have to know those numbers. How often was it streamed? Because obviously those numbers have to be released to someone, and streaming companies were simply not releasing those numbers. Understandably, because again, with streaming, they don't really care about how any individual show does as long as there's a show that is causing people to keep their memberships and pay their money. And so their worry, and it's a reasonable worry, is that if they release numbers for a show that doesn't do well, then people start to panic, and then stock prices drop. Oh, they had a bad show. It's like, well, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't matter if they have a bad show, but they just did not want to release those numbers, which if you're going to pay royalties based on views, you need those numbers.
Yes. You need to.
Yeah, you need to have them. And what these streamers have agreed to do is they still don't want to make these numbers public, but they are going to be releasing them to the WGA. So the WGA will be getting those numbers. Now, they're not allowed to announce those numbers to anyone. It is still classified information, but what they can do is look at those numbers and say, hey, this writer on this show, this is what they need to be getting. So they're able to double check it, and they'll be able to go back to the writer and say, according to your agreement and your contract, this is what you should be getting. And so they'll at least know what they should be getting.
Okay.
And like I said, to me, that was a huge, huge concession to make, and it was one I thought it was going to take a lot longer to get than they did. Now, with the fact that you've been busy, I don't know if you were aware of the whole Drew Barrymore issue.
Yes.
You heard about that.
Yes, I did. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I felt real bad for her because, to go back, basically what she decided to do was she was going to start the next season of her talk show without writers. And I was like, why would you want to do that?
Right.
Because that was a huge risk because not only is she doing a talk show with writers, but they require actors because they're her guests. She's an actor herself.
Yep.
What did she think was going to happen? And she went from basically doubling down on the whole thing because she said she started her talk show during COVID, and the spirit of her show is to be a beacon in tough times. And when times get tough, she felt it was her job to have that show there. And COVID's one thing, but a strike is another.
Right. Yeah.
And so her own writers began to picket that scab.
Right. That's the thing,
all puns intended.
Mayim Bialik left Jeopardy because the actors went on strike, and she's an actress. So these are the same. We put these shows in the same category: talk shows and game shows.
Right.
Yeah, it's.
Well, Bill Maher did the same thing with his show. He was coming back as well, and without writers. Although technically he's a writer.
Right, yeah.
And so he was going to be scabbing the same way. And what made this really, really bad is that, like I said, she doubled down on it. And then she realized the blowback that was coming. And then she did an apology that people didn't buy at all.
Of course.
With what they said was crocodile tears.
Did she wear a white shirt? Was she in a shabby-looking room? That's all the celebrity apology videos.
Yeah.
You wear white, you sit in a shabby room, so we can feel connected, like we're the same guys.
Yeah. So she did her apology, and then suddenly, not that long afterwards, now the writer's strike is over. So it's like, oh, well, now her writers are coming back, and so everything's okay.
Nope.
Nope, they're not coming back. They said, no, we're not coming back.
Bye-bye, Poison Ivy.
Yeah. So what's going to be interesting to see what happens is Are other writers going to work for her? Are actors going to be doing her show? That's going to be the real question. If I'm the union, and not that I would wish anything terrible on anybody, but I really feel like if you give Drew Barrymore a pass on this, then what happens the next time?
Right.
Again, I wouldn't want to see anything bad happen to Drew Barrymore. She should have perhaps thought this through a little better.
Yeah, that's...
But if I were in the union, I would be like, no, she's persona non grata. She's excommunicata.
Yep.
And she's not going to be acting in a movie or a television show. She's done. And I'd hate to see that happen to anybody. But for the sake of the union, I don't see how you would allow her to come back.
Yep. How do you come back from that?
Yeah. But the thing about it is this. Even though the writer's strike is over, the actor's strike is still going on.
Yes.
And they're dealing with the same stuff. Now, the writers, on one aspect, they're creating new material for when the actors come back. But they're not crossing picket lines. In fact, some of them are still marching in picket lines.
Way to go.
They're
Good.
carrying their signs saying the WGA supports SAG-AFTRA.
Yep.
And, we're not out of the woods yet. Now, tomorrow, SAG-AFTRA, they're going to be having meetings starting tomorrow, which is supposed to go through all weekend.
Okay.
So maybe by Columbus Day, maybe by Monday,
Indigenous People Day, Brian.
Indigenous People Day,
Indigenous People Day.
maybe we'll have something. And then
We shall see.
we shall see. And with that said, we come to the end of episode 199. Thank you for listening, and tune in next time for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. From Mandy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.